Hello and good day. I am Coach Jay. Well, actually, Practitioner Jay, but it doesn't matter. I'm Coach Jay, and I always like to start my classes with a corny dad joke. Today, I just wanted to let you know if you ever get locked out of your house, talk to your lock calmly because communication is key. Ba-dum-bum. All right, if you can take two deep healing breaths in through the nose, out through the mouth, preferably with your eyes closed, but however you feel safest. So nice deep breath, opening that chest cavity out through the mouth. One more time. We just baked some delicious cookies, so we're breathing it in. Oh, but they're too warm to eat, so we got to cool them off. Love it. All right. Today, I'm just going to be talking a little bit about how trauma shapes our adult identity. Dissociation in general from oneself has long-term implications for who we become. I say it all the time. So many times we're out and about and we talk to somebody and their attitude is, well, this is just who I am. And it's not necessarily who they are. It's because they're still wearing the protective safety mechanisms of when they were a child and they never worked to take them off and they morphed into them. All right. So let's just start with saying developmental trauma is more common than many of us realize. Let's just start at the beginning. Our childhood. According to the National Child Traumatic Stress Network, about 78% of children reported more than one traumatic experience before the age of 5. Now, I'm not going to get into pre-verbal trauma, especially which usually happens from 18 months to 4-ish, whatever. But almost 80% is a significant amount, regardless. 20% of children up to the age of 6 were receiving treatment for traumatic experiences, including sexual abuse, neglect, exposure to domestic violence, and traumatic loss or bereavement. And I would even include in that when children, even adults, but children experience somebody that unalives themselves. And that could be a betrayal because, again, betrayal trauma, the definition of it is somebody that you have a dependence on, a caretaking relationship, some trust is there. So unaliving oneself is certainly could be included in that. Adults who suffered from developmental trauma may go on to develop what's called CPTSD, complex post-traumatic stress disorder, which is characterized by difficulties in emotional regulation, consciousness and memory, self-perception, distorted perception of perpetrators of abuse, difficulties in relationship with other people, and negative effects on the meaningful of life. So a lot of people that have childhood trauma, developmental trauma, eventually grow into some type of CPTSD. Relationships can be a challenge. Relationships can be a challenge for a lot of reasons, some of which, because of our internal dialogue, we go into adulthood, if we have some developmental trauma, oftentimes with the mindset that we're damaged goods. And because we're damaged goods, we will create what we fear the most. And what is that? Abuse, toxicity, betrayal, what have you. Not to put blame on anyone, because absolutely, if that's what you're getting from this, please, that's not where I'm going. Although we do not have statistic on the rates of CPTSD, risk factors for it are disturbingly common. It's estimated that in 2012, I think that was the most recent study that I could find, there was about 686,000 children that were victims of maltreatment. However, experts believe that these numbers underestimate the true frequency because, again, a lot of these tests are based on who's going to answer them and who's going to raise their hand and say, yes, I was sexually violated. Count me in. Anyways, these children often grow up to be adults that we are today. So a lot of us watching this or in the future, maybe watching this, we are the generation today that may have had some type of developmental trauma in our childhood. Even if we didn't, we had some trauma in our adult life, regardless. So how does developmental trauma impact our identity formation? Identity formation is an important part of normal development, and it takes place across lifespan from birth through childhood and adolescence and adulthood into our old age. Identity, including one's sense of self as being good enough, integration of emotion and intellect, basic awareness of emotional states, all these other things, is disrupted by developmental trauma because basic survival takes precedence over, and of course, uses the resources that we need for normal development. So basically, the earlier the distress, on average, the more profound the effect. Another thing, too, is when we're younger, even as adults, but when we're younger, um, we put on a different pair of glasses that people that don't have trauma don't put on. We look at life completely different now. You know, we look at everybody at times with suspicion. We look at the world as nobody can be trustworthy. Uh, we you put on a different pair of glasses than people that haven't been betrayed or went through some type of developmental trauma put on. The task of identity development in adulthood, challenging enough through challenging enough, is especially fraught for those grappling with the aftermath of developmental trauma. Because of developmental delays and adult consequences of trauma, which often include substance abuse, eating disorders, depression, high risk for other health problems, there's behavioral issues and difficulty in what I just said, which is personal relationships, professional development, and identity of our own development, it all potentially can get jammed up. As a matter of fact, I hate even to say potentially because it's pretty much almost a guarantee. If your foundation is all not cool, then your development is going to take from that, and you're going to be, as I said, jammed up. So with these considerations in mind, I want to highlight some of the key ways that identity tends to be shaped by earlier traumatic experiences. Understanding these basic themes can help us recognize areas of difficulty so we can take steps to doing the work of recovery and repair and growth, which if you're watching this, that's what you're doing. So kudos. One of the first things is, especially in younger years, is there is a loss of childhood. We feel like there's a loss of our childhood. People who experience very distressing childhoods often can't remember patches of their childhood. We may remember particularly vivid moments, sometimes called flashbulb memories, which don't necessarily have context or may not have context to them. We often don't have a clear story of ourselves as a child up to adolescence, early adulthood, and oftentimes even later in life. This autobiographical sense is called a coherent narrative. It's an attachment theory that can be absent and underdeveloped, false, or oversimplified identity too. And it's because you're trying to put pieces together of a puzzle when there's pieces missing. Which brings me to my next part, which is people often feel like there's a missing part of themselves. With chronic developmental distress, children often disconnect important parts of themselves in order to survive. It's a form of dissociation. And that's what I said at the beginning of this class, is that, you know, who we are a lot of times as adults is not just who we are, it's who we become because we never healed from our safety tools and mechanisms growing up. We may come to rely on one major persona in order to have stability and make it appear as if everything were okay, such as being an exemplary student, let's just say, or, you know, while having little or no real life outside of becoming an exemplary student. That's how we compensate. Or we, on our jobs as an adult, we overcompensate on our jobs, or we overcompensate in our marriages and our relationships. So we're going to be the Superman or the Wonder Woman. It's at the expense of, you know, filling our own cup. Later in life, we may feel like parts of ourselves are missing through personal growth and therapy. However, we may rediscover those parts that are missing and actually create new missing parts. Either tap in or dig into those missing parts, make them come up and connect them to ourselves, or actually just create new missing parts. I mean, that's some of the things that you can do with these, with some of the tools to help heal. Our attraction to destructive relationships. I can't tell you how many people, and I'll just use my own family because they know what field I'm in. So everybody comes to me and has relationship things. And oftentimes, very lovingly, I'll say, who's the common denominator in this? I mean, if this is your 12th relationship this year that went awry, what's the common denominator? And that's not to put blame on somebody or whatever. It's that you got to take responsibility for what negativity you might be bringing to the table. And unfortunately, if we come with childhood trauma, um, now we're doing a job we never applied for, which is frustrating, and I get it. It's not uncommon for people who are traumatized by key caregivers to end up with friendships, romantic relationships, and even finding work settings that are not good for us. We may find people who fit our traumatic identity. And this is what's interesting is um, oftentimes we're in relationships, not because necessarily this person is a safe person, but because there's something about them that feels familiar, and familiarity feels good to us. However, if we were abused as children or had some toxicity in our childhood, and then somebody feels familiar, that's not necessarily a good thing. Um, and of course, being in situations like this could absolutely lead to re-traumatizing us and who we are. All right, we may end up being around people that are emotionally unavailable. That's quite common. People that are just unemotionally available. And one of the reasons for that is oftentimes when we are traumatized ourselves or we go through something, we understand how crappy it feels, so we want to become the superhero in somebody else's life. Um, and so we find people that can't give us much because we want to be the saver of their life. So we don't need as much from them because we're going to save them. Um, con consciously, we want to find someone who provides what we intellectually know we need and want, but unconsciously influences that lead us down unwanted familiar paths. As I just said, sometimes we get into these relationships. As a matter of fact, I was doing some premarital coaching not too long ago, and somebody was like, "Man, he just gets me. He just gets me. We've only known each other a few months, but he knows me." Well, yeah, he I won't go into it, but he knew the abusive patterns you went through, and he went through something similar, and it wasn't a good match. Let's just say that. There's also the avoidance of relationships. Alternatively, those with negative developmental experiences involving intimate relationships may opt to avoid closeness, and we tend to isolate ourselves. After all, if people hurt us, why would we want to open ourselves up to people? Because we're going to get hurt. Sometimes this starts early on and sometimes later on in an attempt to break the cycle of harmful relationships. But healthy relationships with other people are crucial for personal development, presenting opportunities for growth and change. You know, not to mention Maslow's hierarchy of needs. We need people in our life. I mean, really. And, people that not just on a, keep your distance quasi Facebook friend, situation. We do need intimate connections. That's just a need. It's really a fundamental need. And also that comes with challenges, but challenge can be a good thing because that allows us to grow. Missing out on these close relationships in adulthood as a self-protective measure further impairs the development of us fully developing our identity, solidifying a self-perception of unworthiness and self-condemnation if we are alone. So, yes, we stay isolated to protect ourselves, um, but we also need human connection. We need human interaction on an intimate level. And I don't mean physically, sexually, on an intimate level. Like, I really want to open up to this person and share a little deeper who I am. All right, the next one is avoidance of oneself. So especially when childhood trauma was a defining component of key relationships, whether that's with your parents, siblings, or other important people, could be from a church leader, what have you. Any reminder of those experiences may lead to efforts to manage painful emotions and experiences through escape from one's self. And escape could mean um, anything we avoid, anything we numb, distract, what have you. And this could be oftentimes people getting into affairs because they use them as a coping mechanism to numb, distract, avoid. It could be people cutting. There's people that cut. And just like a Ferris, people know that's wrong. People know cutting is wrong, but it numbs pain. Connection with oneself, as with others, is a powerful reminder of prior trauma, activating memories and emotions which are often too much to handle. Self-care is impaired. So, I mean, there's people, actually, I worked at a program one time where there was people that just, they didn't want to get out of bed and shower. They're just, they had very little self-love. They had very little care. They just, and actually, this was depression aside. It just, these developmental traumas can impair even self-care. So basically, we often learn to live apart from ourselves. We may not be able to reflect upon ourselves, and certainly don't want to hear encouragement from others, because we listen to our own dialogue the most. All right, and the last one, number 6, is difficulty integrating emotion into our identity. So when feelings have no place in one's family of origin or our family of origin, emotions become split from our identity. So we continue to have influence, leading to confusion and an unstable sense of ourself, because we're unable to predict, let alone manage strong emotions. Then if we get a strong emotions, we lack the tools of how to address them and deal with them. So we need that emotional data to be fully ourselves and to make decisions. Emotional dysregulation leads to problems from impulsive decisions and gets in the way of forming healthy relationships with others. I always tell people, and I'm sorry to talk fast, but I always tell people, if you add the D onto anger, it's danger. And it reminds me of something I saw not too long ago. This bird kept annoying this dog, and the dog tried to ignore it. Now, granted, the dog had different options. The dog could have walked into the house, the dog, whatever, but the bird kept annoying the dog to the point where the dog got so angry, it started chasing the bird. And so the bird starts flying away, and the bird just starts flying up. And little did the dog know, the bird led him to a cliff, and the dog wound up falling over the cliff and dying. So anger and danger is just one letter away from one another. And a lot of times we think anger, we're in control because it gives us a false sense of empowerment. But really, when we're angry, we're at our weakest point because we're out of control. All right, we may experience a sense of emotional numbing, where we don't have feelings at all. We may experience a limited range of emotions, or our emotions are muted. We may, for example, only be able to feel vague emotions such as frustration or boredom, or we may block out dissatisfaction until anger explodes. These are all things that we're just not in tune with if we have trauma, either developmentally or in adulthood. We may only feel negative emotions about ourselves, such as disgust and self-loathing, and recoil from anything and anyone that's presenting a positive view of us, or even positivity in general. I have a cousin. I'm using my family a lot in this class. I have a cousin. I don't care if she wins the lottery and she meets a man on a white and shining armor horse, and you name it. She's always going to find the negative in something. Always going to find the negative. So it could be a beautiful day and you can hand her roses and she's going to hone in on the thorns of the roses. Unfortunately, she had a lot of childhood trauma and she never dealt with it. So this could lead to difficulty in personal relationships, as I said before, as emotions are required for intimacy. And again, a lot of people that were hurt developmentally, man, this shop is closed, period. Don't try to open this shop. It's just not happening. And while that's serving in one way, it's almost like, okay, if a chef gets burned making food, you can say, I'm not cooking anymore. And that you have every right to do that, just like you have every right never to get into a relationship again. But think of all the delicious meals that chef will never enjoy, and think of all the intimate relationships that we all could benefit from if we did step out and open up a little bit more. So I get the reason why, 100%, but are we hindering or helping our healing? So moving forward, this class is not supposed to be about tips on how to heal and stuff. This is just to understand childhood trauma and how it hinders our developmental thing. But while it can be disheartening to hear about all the effects of this trauma and developmental trauma and childhood trauma and adulthood trauma, and it's obviously frustrating to hear how daunting it is that to even have to work to heal some of this and repair and grow into a healthy, or at least quasi-functioning healthy adult. Um, there there are tremendous benefits to you know, the tools, the therapy. They're very effective, and your efforts will pay off. There's no doubt. And I always say, you know, because I'll never forget. I think, you know, Barbara Streisand met James Brolin when I think she was in her 60s, and she said, "I'm going to tell you something. I gave up on love. I really did. I just gave up on love. I was like, you know what? I'm in my 60s. You know, I think she was in her mid 60s or what have you. Doesn't matter. That's what happens a lot of times when we are hurt. We're like, you know what? I am 40. I am 50. I am 60. Whatever. We put our number in there, and we're just it's just who I am now. It's too much work. I'm too old. I'm too tired. No, there's even a little bit of investment, energy, effort will have significant results to your health, and they have ripple effects. So you start to feel good in one area, it's like a domino effect. It starts to open up other areas where you start to feel good. And when you start to feel good in other areas, now you have the strength to put more energy and investment into healing, and then that has ripple effects. So recovery, grieving, and growth often takes place over a longer time period than we want. We all know that. Lord have mercy, if we could take a pill and be perfect, I think we would all empty our bank accounts to do that. Because the growth process, the healing journey sucks in a lot of ways. It's a lot. I mean, man, you gotta slay a lot of demons and dragons on the healing journey, and it can be tough. It can really be tough. Developing a sense that long-term goals are attainable and worth working toward is an important element to establish, even if it doesn't feel possible or true. Working towards getting basic self-care in place is an important first step. So I hope everybody watching this now or in the future absolutely has these fundamentals. And many people that are watching this are like, oh my God, if I hear self-care one more time, I'm gonna pull my hair out. But these are the fundamental building blocks of healing. We want to develop compassion for ourselves, and I think that could be a challenge. That could be a challenge, but we want to develop compassion with ourselves, because that is a springboard to healing. Once we can develop or start to develop self-compassion, that really, like I just said, is a springboard for tremendous and profound healing. So if you need to look up what compassion means, if you need to do a little bit of research or studying on compassion and apply that to yourself, that would be tremendously beneficial to your healing. Even in the sense that when you have self-compassion, now your mind, body, and soul is always looking for what's going to help heal you, as opposed to when the driving force is trauma, where your mind, body, and soul is looking for things to hurt you.